Hello, my friends. We continue to introduce you to various computer components. Today, at the client's request, we will assemble and test a full-fledged system unit based on the Chinese motherboard HUANANZHI X10X99-16D. Users, buyers, and subscribers of our channel have frequently requested in the comments to take a closer look at this particular motherboard. And it's easy to see why. The motherboard is indeed quite interesting. In terms of functionality, the board is almost on par with its branded counterparts, and in some cases, it even surpasses them in terms of available features. What exactly do we mean? We will try to cover this in this video. The motherboard is based on the LGA2011-3 socket and the server chipset C612. It supports server-class processors from Intel, specifically the Xeon series with the Haswell and Broadwell codenames. Since the motherboard itself has an increased complexity of construction, like many boards of this class, it is made on a 12-layer printed circuit board. The motherboard is attached to the PC case using 9 screws and, accordingly, has the same number of holes with a metal trim in the form of rays on the fiberglass to minimize possible damage during installation. Additionally, the printed circuit board itself is sealed with a dielectric solder mask, which protects the layers from oxidation and prevents the formation of bridges between contact pads located close to each other. At least, the manufacturer itself claims to use this technology on its motherboards. Although there is nothing new here, and this technology has been used for quite some time by almost all printed circuit board manufacturers. It is worth noting that not all boards of this class have this feature, as it requires a special technological process. The board and the wiring diagram are indeed of very high quality. The form factor of the motherboard is EATX with exact board dimensions of 305 by 330 mm for processor power. The motherboard has 6 power phases on transistors that you see on the screen now, with a maximum operating temperature of up to plus 150 degrees. The PWM controller for power phase control on the board is a fairly popular ASL6376 microchip. The board has 16 slots for RAM with support for server-grade registered DDR4 memory with a maximum value of up to 2400 MHz, but under certain conditions. The fact is that RAM can operate at a frequency of 2400 MHz only when using a processor on the Broadwell architecture. In the case of using processors on the Haswell architecture, RAM will operate at a frequency of no more than 2133 MHz. The maximum RAM capacity can reach up to 1024 GB. RAM can work on an 8-channel architecture, provided that 8 or more RAM slots are used. Many users often ask in the comments why, when testing RAM speed, we started using the abbreviation for data transfer speed in megatransfers per second, and not in megahertz, as it was before. The fact is that at the moment, new technologies already allow DDR memory to increase data transfer speed without increasing clock frequency, which makes the old way of measuring memory less accurate. Since then, companies and operating systems have switched to a performance metric called megatransfers per second, which is the number of data transfers in millions per second. The board has 5 PCI Express 3.0 slots. 3 of them are 16 lanes and 2 slots are 8 lanes. 2 M.2 slots on the PCI Express 3.0 protocol work directly from the processor. The board has 2 U.2 ports, which allows you to connect high-performance server solid-state drives, SSDs. The main feature of this connector is its versatility, supporting 3 data transfer protocols at once: SATA, SAS, and NVMe. The port supports hot swapping. Disks can be connected and disconnected even on a running server, which allows you to flexibly use drives of different types, simplifies hot swapping of disks, and facilitates storage scaling. This connector was developed exclusively for servers and workstations, and is rarely found on desktop motherboards, as there is essentially no need for it. Although, judging by the trend of increasing performance requirements and the transition to new generations of PCIe 5.0 and 6.0, the limitations of this form factor have begun to manifest, but this is already a completely different and quite extensive topic for discussion. The motherboard has 10 SATA 3 ports, 6 of which are regular SATA and 4 are eSATA ports with support for RAID 0, 1, 5, and 10 technologies. The board is equipped with a high-performance Intel i225E controller, based on which a network card with a data transfer rate of up to 2,500 megabits per second was created. The motherboard has a connector for connecting a hardware security module, which provides data protection using encryption. The main task of TPM is the secure storage and creation of cryptographic keys, certificates, and other confidential data necessary for encryption, authentication, and protection of the system from unauthorized access. The motherboard is equipped with a Realtek ALC662 sound chip, which allows the board to output sound. Server boards of this class often do not have a built-in sound chip due to the integration of chipset functions into the processor. Modern server platforms transfer chipset functions directly to the processor. This means that now processors take on the functions that were previously performed by the South Bridge. In such cases, connecting a sound jack becomes impossible and requires an external sound card. However, in this case, Chinese manufacturers decided to include this functionality in the board, and this is one of the main advantages of this motherboard that we talked about at the very beginning. The motherboard, like many boards of this class, has the ability to remotely manage the system, namely, an intelligent platform management interface, which is implemented using an integrated server management processor ASPEED 2500 in conjunction with a synchronous drum chip with a capacity of 4 GB. From Hynix. For remote server management, the board has a dedicated port from the RTL8211E chip. With this function, you can monitor such parameters as temperature, voltage, fan speed, power supply status, bus errors, physical system security, automatically or manually turn on, turn off, and restart the system, record anomalous states for subsequent analysis and warn users about possible malfunctions, as well as receive information that helps identify failed devices. AS for the processor. In our build, we will use two server processors from Intel, Xeon E5-2696 This processor is a modified version of the Xeon E5-2699 processor. The main difference is only in the support of RAM as DDR4 and DDR3. Let's take a look at the official processor specifications. Note that this 22-core processor has a thermal design power of up to 150 W, which allows you to use budget coolers for the LGA2011-3 socket. The processor itself has a locked multiplier, so overclocking via the multiplier is impossible. With the exception of the possibility of overclocking via the bus, but such a possibility is available only on certain motherboard models. In fact, with this method of overclocking, we can only expect an additional plus 3 to 5% performance. In our case, we will not try to overclock this processor via the bus, since there is no need for this, and we will leave all BIOS values by default. The processor performance settings are quite satisfactory for us. The combined characteristics of the two processors, 44 cores and 88 threads, give a good result in almost all tasks. This is why the combination of price and performance makes this processor the most in demand at the moment. We will use RAM from the South Korean company Samsung, 8 modules of 64 GB each. Thus, the total capacity will be 512 GB. The RAM itself is server-grade registered with the abbreviation 4DIMM DDR4. For dual-socket servers and high-performance computing systems, such modules are the optimal choice. This type of memory has its own specifics and advantages. This type of RAM provides maximum capacity and bandwidth, which are critical for resource-intensive operations and virtualization. 4-rank memory modules contain 4 sets of memory chips, providing maximum memory capacity for the system. These configurations are primarily used in corporate-level servers and specialized computing environments. They provide greater capacity, ideally suited for working with applications that use large amounts of data and large-scale virtualization, while not negatively affecting performance. Simply put, RAM with the abbreviation 4DIMM DDR4 can increase the total amount of memory without losing performance and creates potentially higher space and power efficiency. However, before purchasing RAM of this type, make sure that your motherboard supports this type of RAM. Not all motherboards support this type of RAM. Now let's move on to the video card. At the client's request, We selected a video card whose performance would meet the criteria and wishes of the customer. Our choice fell on the MSI GeForce RTX 4080 Super Expert 16GB video card. At the moment, considering the price and alternatives, this video card is a real novelty. After all, at the moment, competition in this segment is not very high. RTX 4080 Super offers excellent performance comparable to the performance of raster graphics and support for DLSS technology. This is exactly what people are looking for in the premium segment, and all for a reasonable price. The video card is built on the same AD103 chipset as the regular RTX 4080, but with expanded capabilities that activate all available shaders. The card is equipped with factory overclocking. The graphics processor operates at a frequency of 2610 MHz in boost mode against the reference 2550 MHz. The video card is equipped with 16 GB of memory operating at a speed of 23 Gbps. For cooling our processors, we chose the 4UR22 cooler. The cooler has 5 copper pipes and, as practice has shown, it copes well with processors with a thermal design power of more than 150 W.To connect coolers for the processor and case fans. The board has 9 4-pin connectors. So, let's summarize. The motherboard is based on a non-trivial server chipset, which processes almost all ports and peripherals available on the board without additional auxiliary microchips and controllers. The functionality of this model is very good: 3 PCI Express slots on 16 lanes, 5 USB ports of different types, 6 SATA ports and 4 eSATA ports, a wired network controller with a data transfer rate of 2,500 megabits per second, the ability to use up to 1,024 GB of RAM at a frequency of 2,400 MHz, remote system management, a BIOS with various settings typical of server motherboards. The board has a set of M.2 slots, and all of them are connected directly to the processor, which means that when installing a server processor, they will receive all the advantages of the PCI Express 3.0 bus. The processor power system is capable of powering any compatible processors in turbo mode. The board has 9 connectors for connecting fans and pumps. The board is compatible with almost any EATX form factor case. For a relatively small amount of money, you get a new server-class motherboard and almost all the functionality inherent in server motherboards. Further, everything is as usual. We assemble the system unit, conduct tests, and send the ready-made computer to the client.
What the fuck happened here?